not a happy week, but, we're moving forward.
We'll talk about BYU in the first four in a moment, but what were some of your assessments and takeaways from BYU's loss to Washington?
I thought they fought hard. I thought they were outmanned. Part of the reason they were outmanned was injuries. BYU just can't afford that. And part of the reason was depth. When you're facing a team like Washington, they can throw their second lines on both lines of scrimmage in there if they need to, in there, and they're just about as good as the first, where BYU's starters have to play a lot more because there's more of a drop-off because of depth, then you're going to end up getting beat down, and that's kind of the way it was. And I think it kind of told in this fourth consecutive game against a Power 5 opponent. No other school in the nation, I believe, has played 4 consecutive Power 5 opponents, much less 3 of them ranked at the time they played them. So this is a really difficult schedule, and I thought the fight was there, the effort was there, and that's really the most you can ask from a group that's been facing such a physical start.
Trevor, when Tyson Williams went down and was helped off the field, you're certainly hoping for the best, not just for BYU, but certainly for him. We found out he announced via social media he tore his ACL. He's done for the year. How big of an effect does the loss of Tyson Williams have on BYU's offense?
It's huge. Physically, he was able to pound it in there. I mean, he looks like an SEC running back. And the actual physicality will be missed, but more than that, I think the mental side, where guys believe that with Tyson Williams, they had the ability to pound that ball and really improve that running game as the season wore on, that is lost as well. So now other guys will have to step up and create that same kind of belief and excitement in the locker room that Tyson Williams did.
I would love for BYU to be in a Power 5 conference one day and for them to be able to get the recruits that can handle this kind of schedule and the amount of Power 5s and the tough schedule that BYU is aspiring to play. But right now that's not the case, and BYU's played 4 Power 5s in a row, as you mentioned, 3 ranked. And unfortunately, it seems like BYU gets banged up when they go out of the gates against competition like this. And in the next couple of years, as we outlined earlier, BYU is going to play 3 or 4 Power 5s to start a season often. This is the model BYU's chosen. But it's tough, it seems like, Trevor, because BYU's got some injuries. They had to throw Tyler Algier, running back, at linebacker on Saturday.
Right, linebacker to running back, back to linebacker. I mean, there's the recruits they get are good enough to compete at this level. The problem is they're just not enough. The SEC famously has been called not just a line of scrimmage league, but a line of scrimmage depth league. And I think all the Power 5 is like that to one degree or another. And when BYU is able to hold up on that front line and then put in a second line to play almost as many plays, this is defensively now especially, a second rotation to play almost as many plays as a starting rotation, and there's not much of a drop-off, then the starters come back in and they're fresh, then the backups come back in, there's not much of a drop-off. It's a huge difference from what BYU is able to do right now as an independent, which is have that first line in there be really stout and really good. But the second line is still in a stage of their development that there is a drop-off. It's not so much a matter of talent as it is a matter of talent combined with the readiness to go in. And that's just the nature of where BYU is in the college football hierarchy and their ability to recruit. And I'm not denigrating any individual player here. Just to say that if BYU was in a Power 5 conference, you would see a similar recruiting trajectory as we've seen with Utah, where they've been able to recruit more of those guys. Instead of having just a few, they've got a bunch, and they're able to rotate now a defensive line that on the second line has a bunch of future NFL guys, the backups. And for BYU to approach that level, what they've got to do is go more than just 2-2 against the schedule like they started with. Go 3-1, and then do it again, and then do it again. That will attract more of those recruits in depth and will allow BYU to build that depth that they need to really compete without getting injured. Because keep in mind that in this fourth game against Power 5 to start the season, BYU starters probably had to play a lot more than the Power 5 team starters that they played. And that tends to wear on you as time goes on.
It's a Matich Monday here on BYU Sports Nation. Trevor Matich joining us on the Deseret First Credit Union hotline. Trevor, if you are an opposing team that can run the ball, so far you've been able to have success on the ground against the BYU defense. What is your concern level that teams are able to run the ball like they have been against this defense?
It's a health concern more than anything else. Not having Zane Anderson is a huge deal. Anderson is one of those guys that's able to fully complement the kind of thumping defensive linemen that BYU's have, the Kairos Tongas of BYU's line that can just eat up blockers and allow guys like Zane Anderson to fly around to knife through gaps and make tackles behind the line all over the field. And not having him there, having other guys hurt, or if not hurt, certainly dinged up, Chaz Aryu and others that are banged up, if not out, let's put it that way, that hurts BYU. And so I think that as guys get healthier, and I think as the schedule levels out, you'll see a better representation of what BYU is capable of in terms of stopping the run. It was just a perfect storm of schedule combined with injuries that have made the defense look worse than it really is.
I wonder if there comes a point, Trevor, where BYU in its 2 losses turned it over more, dropped balls, more penalties, that kind of thing. If that's not a coincidence, if that is brought on because the opponent is superior and you're trying to make a play, right? Yet in BYU's 2 wins against USC and Tennessee, BYU positive in the turnover margin, didn't drop as many passes, limited penalties. How do you see it? Is that a product of the competition being good, or BYU just didn't play well on those days?
I think a little bit of both. I think when the competition is good, you try to force it a bit to make a play, and that's counterintuitive to what really needs to happen, and that is first do no harm. More football games are lost than they are won, but a lot of times in striving to win, you put the ball in a dangerous place, or you leave your gap on defense, or something like that actually makes it more likely that you'll lose. And BYU has had a real problem in recent games, heading back to last season, of giving up non-offensive touchdowns, pick sixes and scoop and score. And, we had a punt return by Washington for a touchdown. And if they just stopped that, took care of the ball better, and maybe lived the punt instead of trying to make a play, then I think you'd see also them being able to play from a more reasonable score situation. And so I think that's one of the most important things for players that are getting used to this kind of schedule to understand. The Hippocratic Oath of football is critical. First, do no harm. Then go make plays.
Toledo is BYU's next opponent. BYU will head to the Glass Bowl coming up on Saturday. The Rockets, coming off a victory over Colorado State on the road, their running back, Bryant Koback, rushed for a career-high 228 yards with 3 touchdowns. How do you think the Cougars match up this week against Toledo?
Well, ordinarily they match up pretty well, but I think they're banged up. I think they'll feel it in their bodies. I think the injuries and being thin at linebacker are going to matter, because linebackers against a running back like this are going to have to not only thump on the downhill run, but they'll have to take on blockers and change direction, and that tires you out as well. Add to that the quarterback at Toledo is a really good runner as well, and Tyler Huntley was the only real rushing threat at quarterback that BYU has faced so far of Utah. And he made a lot of big running plays, important running plays against the Cougars when they were fully fresh. So this is a threat. Toledo is not necessarily a huge step down. They're one of the favorites to win the Mid-America Conference. And they've got the kind of combination running back and running quarterback that is a real threat. And so, they'll need to really suck it up and strap it on against these guys, because Toledo is no cupcake. They're no joke.
And nationally, let's look at what's going on. Who's your surprise team in college football so far? It seems like it's been somewhat predictable, but is there a surprise team for you so far this season?
Yeah, my big surprise team is Michigan, for the opposite reason of being a good surprise team. I actually had Michigan being in the playoff. I thought that their new offensive scheme, combined with the talent that we know they have on offense, would combine with a championship-level defense that's replaced a lot of guys that went off to the NFL, with more guys that are fast and athletic and can play. But the offense, sometimes those guys look like they've never played football before in their lives. The best way to describe it is clunky. And the most charitable grade to give it right now is incomplete, because they're losing fumbles as fast as you can almost hand off the ball. They don't know who to block. They don't hit the right holes. They look like they're not coached. They look like they're not well coached. And the scheme doesn't put them in a very good position. Now, how much of that is the players not executing, and how much it is the coaches not developing them correctly, remains to be seen. But I thought Michigan would come into the season with a championship-level defense, which they did, and that the offense would pick up, which it did not. And you saw the defense against Wisconsin of the Wolverines get completely deflated. And it kind of hurt my heart a little bit, because once Wisconsin got up 2 scores, the Michigan defense looked like they knew that their own offense would not be able to catch up, and they seemed demoralized. You know, their body language, they were slouching and looking down and walking slowly and things like that. It just was awful. And I just don't see any hope for Michigan, any hope, as long as the offense looks like it does. See, with BYU, when they've been overmatched, they've fought hard and they never quit. It looked like against Washington that Michigan defense, I don't want to say they quit, but I want to say they looked demoralized, and that really surprises me.
Yeah, a lot of unhappy campers in Ann Arbor today. As always, Trevor, we appreciate the time. Where are you going to be this week?
Radio's going to be home. I'm heading right now down to Washington, D.C., where the Redskins will host the Bears on Monday Night Football.
Very nice.
I'll do the pregame and postgame. Yep.
Okay. Have a great analysis tonight, and thanks for the time, Trevor.
All right. Thanks, guys.